Hello, and welcome to Digitalize's second ever webinar. My name is Sophia, and I'm going to be moderating this panel discussion and presentation today. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to attend. I know we're all very busy. Today, we're going to be covering a range of topics from European SVOD viewing trends, viewer behavior analysis, insight into SVOD viewership, specifically in Netherlands and Poland. These are two of the territories that we've recently added to our SVOD analytics tool, SODA. Now, if you'd like to tweet along to this event, our handle is @digital_I_, and we're going to be using the hashtags DIWebinar22 and #viewingrevolution. So, the session today is going to mainly start with a quick intro to the company and to SODA itself. We'll then quickly move on and share insight on SVOD habits in the Netherlands and in Poland. And we'll follow that up by comparing these habits with the habits of other viewers across Europe. We'll then highlight some key content trends in these markets and share our knowledge and opinions on the importance of the availability of local content on global services. Finally, a few housekeeping rules. All of your microphones and cameras should be switched off for the duration of the webinar, and questions can be submitted at any time through the Q&A function on Zoom. At the end of the presentation, there'll be a moderated discussion in which we'll address as many questions as we can, but if we don't make it to your question, that's fine, because we'll be following up all unanswered questions after the event. There will also be a recording of this webinar made available to everyone who's registered. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce to the digital stage, Ali Vedati, the CEO and founder of DigitalEye.
Thank you very much, Sophia. Thank you everyone for attending this session. My name is Ali Vedati. I'm the CEO and founder of DigitalEye. I just want to put the session in context with a short chat. When I was thinking about this session, I was thinking how much the world has changed since the 1970s, when I can remember watching TV. We've gone from predominantly, well, fully watching content only at home and in the cinema, having a 3-channel system. At that time, we used to have to go to holiday shops to book holidays. You had to go, they were actually pay phones. You had to use public phones for making calls when you're outside your house. And now we live in a world where you can view TV on any device, anywhere in the world, a number of different services. And what we've done today is we've going to explain to you how we brought ourselves up into a new way of measuring, which allows for executives to get the insight they need from the SVOD viewing. About us, we started our life as a TV research agency. We cut our teeth learning about the entertainment industry and realizing all the measures that are important to the industry. For 20 years, we worked with the top UK broadcasters, US studios, providing intelligence on linear TV viewing in the UK. And so our foundation is we are a TV research company. We're not a new tech company that's coming to because we can handle lots of big data. We know the business, we've cut our teeth in the game, and now we got a new way of doing things. We brought it all together for you. So since 2014, we noticed total TV started going down in the UK. And our broadcaster clients were saying to us, what's happening here? By 2017, the decline had really started to accelerate. And we were tasked by our clients to find a way of measuring what's going on. And we did some field work, and then the culprit was subscription video on demand. And then between 2017 and 2019, we spent time and money and found out loads of ways where we couldn't do it. But in 2019, we struck gold. We cracked it. We can measure SVOD. And by the September 2019, we were providing a service in the UK for Netflix viewing. We were updating it every quarter. and we had a significant client base in the UK. By the end of 2019, our international client base, streamers, production companies, studios, pushed us to do Europe. And during the pandemic, we took on more staff and we expanded into covering Europe. But by middle of 2020, we were still providing Netflix on a quarterly basis in 5 countries in Europe. Now, we're measuring Netflix, we're measuring Amazon, we're measuring HBO Max. Now we are in 15 different regions. We are in Europe, in many different regions in Europe. We are in the key Latin American regions. What our ambition is to be the #1 global SVOD provider, capturing over 95% of the global revenue. And by middle of next year, we're going to be there. Now, we've been very lucky in our journey, and what we've done is our methodology is very similar to the TV research, TV agencies, the TAM agencies, the JICs, but we've had a huge advantage because we've had the answer in the back of the book. The big agencies that set up this measurement system, no one really truly knows how many people watch EastEnders. Yeah, it's based on sampling. There isn't a true answer somewhere. However, because of the work we're doing, we work with 5 of the global SVOD providers. The work we're doing, they've got the answers in the back of the book. They've got census data, and they've continued to work with us, and they've reassured us that what we're producing is accurate. So thank you very much, Sophia, for the introduction. I'm going to hand you over to Matt, who's going to actually show you some of this data, because it's enough talking. Let's do some talking. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ali, and good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to kick off by just going a little bit into more detail about the data that we're actually going to show you today. Ali's already given an introduction as to how this measurement system came about, but I'll give you a bit more information on kind of the data that we're going to be showing you. So to start with, the data that we're going to be showing you is from a panel. So we collect panels across all of the territories that we cover. And in each territory, we collect data from 1,250 respondents. And those respondents provide us with account level data for Netflix and Amazon Prime Video. So what we're doing is we're collecting from a panel that is representative in each of those markets. So that 1,250 is a representative panel of the subscriber bases that we measure. So currently Netflix and Amazon, and as Ali mentioned, HBO Max is on its way. And also the data that we're covering is account level. So it's covering everything that's viewed in the account. So that is regardless of the device. That's regardless of whether the viewing takes place in the home or out of the home. We are capturing all of that viewing. We're also capturing things like recorded viewing when it's being downloaded, watched offline, and then used in that way. So what we're capturing is that full account data, which means we get a really good understanding of what the account is doing as a whole, and really understand that subscription style market and how it's used. And we're going to be touching quite a bit on today on how the accounts are used as a whole and how that viewing is spread through an account. And the way that works is that we're able to allow users to share their data with us and obviously claim a reward for doing so. And that's one of the reasons why, one of the big things about our system is that it's globally scalable. So the way that we're set up and the way that it works, we believe that we can scale this globally very fast. We have done already with a number of territories we're in, and we will continue to do so and move closer to that global SVOD measurement system that Ali was talking about. So that's the key things to remember today. The data we're looking at, full account data for Netflix and Amazon Prime Video today, and it's all passively collected account viewing data that takes place across all devices in the home, out of the home. I'm also going to jump into a little timeline for you as well, just to add a bit more context to the countries that we're going to be covering today. So we're going to be covering and focusing predominantly in on Netherlands and Poland. And the reason why we're focusing in on those 2 countries is because they're our newest territories. We launched these territories very recently into our system. So this webinar is around bringing a little bit more color and kind of bringing some new insights for those markets. And secondly, we're also going to covering data from the other European territories that we're capturing. So that's UK, France, Italy, Germany, Spain, and the Nordics. And we are going to be using them, as comparisons, as benchmarks throughout the process as well. So give a bit more, background to this. 2012 was when UK and Nordics had Netflix. and 2013 was when the Netherlands came into play there. But it wasn't until 2016 that Poland launched in the Netherlands, and Netflix had launched in Poland. So we know that there's a bit of a gap there between the Netherlands and Poland's launch, and it was launching throughout Europe during, in the interim period between those dates, as well as Amazon Prime Video launching in the UK and Germany. For Amazon Prime Video across Netherlands and Poland, it actually wasn't until 2020, 2021 that Amazon Prime Video, as we know it, the free service, was launched in those territories. So it's a really big factor that these for Amazon Prime Video, these are relatively new markets that we're talking about, and that's reflected in some of the data that we're going to show you. So we are going to start by focusing in on Amazon Prime Video and Netflix in Poland and Netherlands. So let's start with that. So the first chart I'm going to show you here is account reach. It's account reach over time. So it's account reach by month on Netflix for Poland and Netherlands. And we're taking the chart back to the beginning of 2019. And you can see that, Poland is obviously a less established market at this point compared to Netherlands. So Netherlands a little bit more mature, a little bit higher in terms of penetration levels. However, Poland obviously a slightly larger market than the Netherlands and expanding a bit faster. So by the time you get into early 2022, the amount of reach on a daily, the amount of reach on a monthly basis for Poland is actually exceeding that of Netherlands. So obviously there's a big increase in the amount of accounts that are subscribing to Netflix in Poland, and Netherlands is a bit more mature, so a bit flatter in that line. So you can see that acceleration is a higher point there for Poland in Netflix than it is for the Netherlands. And the same thing can be said of Amazon to an extent, but of course, for Amazon for Poland, it's relatively recent. The same thing can be said of Netherlands as well. And the numbers are a lot smaller than they are for Netflix. It's not an established service in that respect as anywhere near the level that Netflix is. So you can see that, opposed to the numbers of around 2.5 million that we were seeing in Netherlands and Poland, the numbers are, a percentage of that, a fraction of that, 200, 300, 400,000, getting closer to 500,000 on a monthly basis towards the end of June 2022. So we can see that the numbers are not as significant. So, we will be focusing a little bit more on Netflix than we're doing on Amazon in this presentation. We'll be touching on some of the content that's doing well on Amazon in those countries, but a lot of the analysis and the deep dive stuff we're going to do into account viewing, into performance levels in general, we're going to focus a little bit on Netflix because that's where we've got the bulk of the data. That's where we're finding some of the bulk of the insights and some of the really interesting stuff on the differences between these two and within the context of the wider European market as well. So I'm going to shift into looking at Netflix, and we're going to look at streams. So you would have noticed in that first chart that I showed you that it wasn't until around about early 2022 that we saw that Poland was ahead of Netflix in terms of reach, and ahead of Netherlands in terms of reach. So it was getting more viewers than the Netherlands towards that end of that kind of early 2022, end of 2021 point. But if you look at this table, when we're looking at total consumption levels, actually that went over the levels for Netherlands, back as early as 2020. So you can actually see is that, despite lower subscription levels at that point, we're actually seeing higher levels of viewing. So that's obviously telling us something. That's telling us that the take-up of Netherlands, of Netflix in Poland is really strong, and that people are watching quite a lot of it. That's what it's suggesting to us. But we're going to dive into that a little bit more deeply now and look at Poland in particular and see what's driving those levels of viewing, higher than Netherlands, and looking at that at a slightly different angle. The first of those is to look at levels of daily reach as a percentage. So what we're showing you here is the percentage of Netflix subscribers that would tune in each day on average per month from 2019 through to June of 2022. So you can see in here, there is a slight difference. So it's not a huge difference, but there is a slight difference. You can see that Netherlands, for example, is getting around about 50 to 60%, going over 60%, closer to 70% towards the end of 2021, 2022, whereas Poland's slightly higher than that, 70, getting upwards closer to 80% in 2022 as well. So there's a slight difference, 5-10% more for Poland than Netherlands on a daily basis. So that's more people coming in, more accounts as a proportion coming in every day. So that's obviously going to be a contributing factor to driving up those total levels of viewing. And the same can then be said a frequency. And actually, it's probably a slightly starker and slightly bigger difference. The gap widens when we start looking at frequency. So we can say not only are they coming in on a more regular basis, or they're coming in, more people coming in each day, what we're actually seeing is that when accounts are coming in and watching Netflix, they're then tending to watch more. So the frequency for a Netherlands, for example, is sitting at more around 4 or 5 streams per day, whereas that's actually at an account level much higher for Poland. It actually goes up towards 6 to 8 streams per day. So sitting around this kind of 6 to 8 area. So you can see that there's 2, 3 more streams a day in Poland on Netflix than there's in Netherlands. So when those people do come in, they're spending more time in there, they're watching more content. And that's obviously at account level. It's clear. It's obviously important to remember that that is at the account level, and we'll dive into that and explain that a little bit more in a second. And that all means that when we talk about average daily minutes, we get a similar kind of view. So you can see that all, is looking at, that is all resulting in a higher level of consumption in general. So you can see here that we've got for Poland, for example, we're sitting at around about 3 hours plus of viewing a day for an account on Netflix, which is a big number. Whereas for Netherlands, it's closer to kind of 2 hours a day. So looking at an hour plus more viewing in Poland every day per account than Netherlands. So there is a big difference there in terms of the viewing levels in general. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put that into a little bit more context against some of the other European territories that we measure, and we're going to start kind of stacking those up against some of those other countries. To start with, we are going to look at average daily minutes again. So we're going to stay with that same metric. And what we're going to do is we're going to focus in on the most recent month. So I'm at the end month of our period there, which is June 2022. And we're going to start looking at kind of average levels of consumption at account level for Netflix. And you can see here for Netherlands, for example, those figures are not too dissimilar from the likes of UK, from the likes of the Nordics, not a million miles away from Germany as well. And then France is somewhere in the middle. Italy, a bit heavier, and then you start getting into kind of this territory with Spain and Poland, which is very, very similar numbers, which is around that 3 hours a day mark. So it's quite a big difference between Poland and some of the other established territories that we have data for. But the similarity here is, very, very consistent with the performance of Spain. So there's clearly some similarities between what's happening in Poland, what's happening in Spain, people being driven into Netflix more and watching, more content when they're there as well. We're then going to dive a little bit more into the profiles within those accounts. So this is a view of the number of active profiles per account. And by active, we mean over that month of June 2022, they have watched something. So we're saying that per Netflix account in Poland, there are 3.35, so just over 3 on average accounts that have watched something over that month. And when you compare that to some of the other countries, you've got Netherlands at 2.78. That's similar again to UK, to Nordics, and it's actually higher than Spain this time. So what we're actually seeing is more accounts, more profiles watching within an account. So it's not necessarily heavy viewing that's all concentrated to a main account, for example. We're actually seeing multiple accounts viewing across that month. And that starts to ask questions around things like account sharing. Is that happening here? Are we starting to see people sharing accounts across households? Is that what we're seeing happening? Is that what's driving higher proportion of profiles being used? Of course, like the cap on Netflix is 5 profiles per account. So you can get that, you can see that there's more profiles being used in Poland than any of the other countries. We've then wanted to qualify that a little bit more by looking at the number of active profiles that are watching more than 30 minutes a day on across that month of 2022 June. So we can see again that we've got Poland as the highest number. So not only are these accounts coming in, but on average, just under 2 of them are watching more than 30 minutes a day. So there are 2 pretty heavy viewing accounts, pretty active viewing accounts that we're capturing as part of this. So again, that does lean into that question. Is there more account sharing going on, or are they being used throughout the household more? And again, it's higher than Netherlands, UK, Nordics. Nordics in particular is very, very low. So they don't have very many profiles within the accounts that are using Netflix that regularly or watching that much on average. So that's really interesting. And there's obviously a wide number of questions. You've got account sharing, the question around account sharing. You've got a question around about the makeup of these households, which we're going to touch on. But also, what else is out there? What competition does Netflix have in these markets? I think has to be considered. What are other options? What's dragging them out of these platforms? Is linear TV not good enough to do so? Is there not enough competitive services in those markets? And that's what allowing Netflix to get more people in, more people viewing it as well. But let's take it back to that question regarding the makeup of those individual accounts and the households that use them, because I think that's where we find some quite interesting results here. So what we've got is a comparison between Poland and Netherlands, and then we've put Spain in as a bit of a benchmark in here, because whilst this analysis I think is quite interesting, it also does pose a few extra questions as well, because what we're looking at here is then the makeup of those accounts. So what we're looking at here with Poland on this right-hand side, if we focus in on this side initially, is you can see that 93% of accounts in Poland have somebody aged 16 to 44 living in the household that uses that account. So that's 93% is young viewers. And that is, 74% in Netherlands, but it's right down at 50% in Spain. So there is a big difference there between Poland and Spain, even though the viewing levels are the same. And that same thing can be said when you focus in on 77% have 16 to 34s, so they're looking at that younger group, and then 44% have households that have kids in them, and that's kids 15 or younger. So you can see again, more likely to have to be a heavier viewer because they've got a larger household size, more families. They're watching kids content, which is obviously going to drive consumption up as well. But interestingly, a country like Spain, where we're seeing slightly different results, we're still seeing the same viewing levels. So I don't think it's it's not the slam dunk of the answer. I think there's lots going on there. And there's a huge, obviously this is not where you're drawing that direct comparison between those viewing levels. So it's interesting. And just to bring back, a couple of those points. The first is just to look, generally speaking, at what happens with households with kids, just to kind of give a bit more context to those shows. To those breakdowns, sorry. So you can see here that we have, for all of the SVOD European territories, we just looked at average consumption by month in terms of minutes, in terms of viewer minutes for January through to June of this year. And you can see that generally speaking, on a month-by-month basis, households with kids view more than households without kids. And when we look at the next chart, we're looking at households that are exclusively 45 plus, this is our kind of green line here, versus households that are not, younger households. And you can see again that the gap widens. So when you got households that are exclusively of that 45 plus age, the viewing levels drop in comparison to a younger household. So having younger people within the household tends to be a sign that viewing levels are going to be driven upwards. So that's kind of looking in and diving into some of the really key findings and some of the really interesting stuff that came out of the initial analysis on the differences between the new markets that we have, Poland and Netherlands, and some of the more established markets that we have in Europe. But I'd also then like to now bring it and start looking at a bit of content, what's being viewed in these new markets on these platforms, and try and provide a bit more information there. So we're going to start off with a few top lists. So starting with the first top list, we have Amazon quarterly top 10s. And what we're doing here is we're looking from the beginning of July, at the beginning of Q3 of last year, all the way through to the end of June, end of Q2 of this year as well. So we can start to see the top 10 lists, and you're going to see a little bit of a theme here for Amazon. One thing you'll notice, and it's worthwhile being aware of, is that these reach numbers of around 11, 12, 25%, some of the top performing ones. We'll show you these in context with the Netflix, because what you'll find, generally speaking, and this is true across all of Europe, is that our reach percentages, our numbers of people that are going in for that top content, is significantly higher on Netflix than it is on Amazon. Of course, Amazon has more to its offering than just the video part so of its subscription. So perhaps it's understandable that it's not quite hitting those high percentage numbers for content like Netflix is, and we'll show you those numbers for Netflix in a second. But you can see some interesting themes. If you look at the top performing show in each of those quarters, it tends to be an action style movie. You've got Tomorrow War, Infinite, you've got The Contractor down here. Reacher isn't a movie, it's a series, but it's still kind of action style. So there is a theme in terms of the top performing show in each of those quarters. Obviously, some of the other stuff, you're starting to see some of the content that we know is popular in countries like the UK. So you've got the Grand Tour here, you've got Clarkson's Farm. Grand Tour also appears, Series 4 also appears in the next quarter as one of the top performing shows as well. So we're going to be touching a little bit on the relationship that the Netherlands has with the Nordics and the UK, in terms of the content that they're viewing in a bit. But, we know that the Netherlands has a high proportion of English speakers. So US and UK content is likely to perform well over there. And you can see that in these results. Moving into Poland, similar levels of reach again. So those 15, 16, 17, 20% in terms of the reach, but similar results, except for a couple of interesting ones. So the Wheel of Time, we know, was a popular show across Europe in Amazon. Didn't do quite as well as the Netherlands, but it performed well in Poland. So it's a fantasy style drama that's done particularly well. And The Boys is a real flagship show for Amazon and did particularly well here at 19%. And Reacher again. So these are two really popular shows that have done very, very well. And there's a couple of more local shows that seem to have done well as well. So a little bit more investment in local content, but still it's all the US content really. And that's really driven by Amazon investment in local content. There isn't at the levels that it has been with Netflix for those countries. I'm going to now bring that all together and just look at a top 20 for the entire period. And we're going to bring in the other countries and show a little bit of a comparison. So you can look at here, for example, some of the really interesting stuff is around things like the Grand Tour. So you can see the Grand Tour here, Series 4, appealing to this about 18% of subscribers across the year. And that number is much more significant than any of these countries here: Germany, Spain, France, Italy, Poland. But then the UK, again, at 31% is higher. So it's a show that's performed particularly well in the UK, but still does well in the Netherlands. And then the same can also be said of this one right at the bottom, Clarkson's Farm, which is getting closer to 20% in the UK and then 13% in Netherlands, but it's not really landing in the other European territories. So there seems to be some sort of crossover and correlation, which we'll dig into a little bit more regarding the relationship between the viewing in the Netherlands and the UK. The Wheel of Time is one that we mentioned that perhaps we thought may have done better in the Netherlands and hasn't performed quite as well as expected, but you can see it's very consistent performer over the other territories that we're looking at here. And then to go to Amazon, again, viewing levels are pretty strong. Wheel of Time is a performer across the entire year and very consistent performer with a lot of the other territories. Greenland is an interesting one. I think it's more to do with availability on the platform here that's causing it to be higher in Poland, but seems to be another US movie that seems to have performed quite well. So again, and there's some interesting examples down here with some of these shows that seem to just generally speaking do a bit better in Poland than some of the other countries, which maybe is also a reflection of the viewing trends that we saw when we deep dived into a bit more of the Netflix data earlier, that tends to be a kind of higher take up in Poland than some of the other countries. Let's shift into Netflix next. So we're looking at the exact same breakdowns, the exact same charts that we were looking at for Amazon, but this time with Netflix. The first thing that I'm sure will strike you is the numbers. So you can see here, for example, we're talking around about 40, 30, 40% rather than the 10, 12, 20% that we were seeing in the previous tables. And you can see here that that's pretty consistent across the quarters. This one will also stand out. So Squid Game, we all know what that was, and we all know the success it was, and you can see that reflected in here. It's an astronomical numbers that it was able to achieve the back end of last year in Q4, getting 77% reach. So that's 77% of Netflix accounts in Poland watching at least an episode of Squid Game. So it's huge exposure and a huge performance from Squid Game in particular. But these types of numbers are fairly typical. So we're seeing in the Netherlands fairly typical for 40, 50% to mean that you're getting towards the top of that. And you can see there's a couple of classic examples like Tinder Swindler, Squid Game that are coming to the top. But you've got an example like Undercover, which was a Dutch production that is getting close to those numbers as well. So it's showing the fact that local content that is produced and commissioned in the Dutch language, featuring those actors, is also performing well, and it can really drive viewing in those local markets as well. And we'll do a bit more to compare with the other countries in that respect as well. But then if we compare that again to Poland, you're going to see those numbers jump even higher. So we can see again, we looked at the figures earlier. We know they use more profiles. We know they watch more. We know they're watching more frequently. And we are seeing that reflected in the reach percentages figures here. So Squid Game was 77%, Poland is 84%, so it's even higher. Really high percentage numbers for Squid Game in that quarter in terms of that number of subscribers tuning in. And then things like Money Heist. We've got a local production here that's performing at 75%, and then here as well more local productions that are performing really well. I think this is a really interesting development for the Polish market. If you look at these top 5 or so titles in the last quarter, they're all local produced pieces of content. They're all content that is not going to perform as well globally, but it's really going to drive viewing in Poland. And if you look at that in context with the subscriber growth that they're making in Poland, the amount of consumption levels that are on there, that clearly there's a strong relationship between the viewers and the platform there. And then just to bring that back to our top 20s for the entire year and compare them, this is where you're going to be able to spot quite comfortably and quite easily the locally produced stuff. So we've got 2 here, locally produced content that is performing very well in the Netherlands, but it's not really landing as much. If we look at Undercover here, which is the top performer in that respect for the Netherlands, it's it's only hitting around 4, 5, 8% in Poland is as high as it's getting in the other territories. Whereas the Forgotten Battle does slightly better and actually performs very well in Poland as well, which is really interesting. But there's still the top performers are the type of things that we would expect to see. So Squid Game, again, really strong. Red Notice, the movie. Don't Look Up, another really strong movie. Tinder Swindler as well. So these are, things that are going to appear in the top lists across most countries, still performing really well in the Netherlands. And, Squid Game aside, it's US, mainly US content, English language stuff that's still hitting the heights. And that's the case for much of the other top 20 here in the Netherlands. So it's only really a couple of cases where local content's making more of an impact. And then we've got Poland, slightly different picture in Poland across the same analysis. So Squid Game, of course, we know, across the year, 91% of accounts watching it over that 12-month period is massive. And you can see that, in the likes of Italy and Spain, there's similar numbers, not quite as strong in the UK for Squid Game, but still massive in terms of the total number of subscribers and the proportion of subscribers that are watching it. But the top 20 has got more local content in there. So, you've got this Chernobyl show here, you've got Fierce, you've got more content. The Witcher is a really interesting one because The Witcher is around based on a story that originated from Poland, but it's obviously based on a video game as well, and it's produced by a US company with Polish companies involved in the production of that show. And that's, again, really reflected in the percentages that we're seeing that The Witcher is able to achieve 70%. When you compare it to some of the other countries, a strong performer, yes, but in that kind of 30 to 40 mark rather than up in the 70%. So they've really kind of taken that show on and it's become really popular in the Polish market. And other local content here. So you can see that there's clearly a strong drive towards, using locally produced content in that country that of that language to appeal to them directly, to drive that market. And it seems to be working well. They're all featuring, a lot of them anyway, are featuring in that top list for the last 12 months. So the next thing we're going to start looking at is a little bit of the relationship between the countries that we've talked about already. And so what we've done is, for the next stage of the analysis, we've isolated the top 200 performing shows on Netflix, and these are Netflix originals. So what we're looking at is the shows that Netflix are commissioning, the shows that are on Netflix, and they are globally available on Netflix. They're globally distributed by Netflix, so that we know that they're available on each of the countries, that we look at. And then we're comparing the performance across the countries and running some correlation. We've added a couple of lines into each of these graphs. We've got a black dotted line that I'm following along here, and that shows you, the line of fit between the two percentages. So this one is showing us 70% on each, and then the blue line is the trend line, showing us where that trend seems to be going in terms of performance. So the highest correlation that we see from the Netherlands is with the Nordics. And, that would make sense in terms of geographical location, taste, but also the proficiency of English as well, and then what that means for UK and US content. And you can see there's a very tight correlation. You've got 81% as an R-squared value. So that means that, the huge amount of the variation in the performance of content on Netflix in the Netherlands, you can see that also in the performance of the content, in the Nordics as well. So there's a really tight relationship. There's a few little examples there. Again, we've got The Unforgivable coming up, as you'd expect, and this one coming up as well. Money Heist seems to have done better in the Netherlands than the Nordics. And you've got a couple of other examples down here that we spoke about quite a bit in our Nordics webinar we did a little while ago, which talks about, this title, which is a Swedish title, this title, which is a Danish title, performing far better in the Nordics, as you'd expect. So what tends to kind of stick out, and become the outliers tends to be the content that is directly, marketed, and is directly created with a certain market in mind. And that's clear to see from this, but largely the correlation is really strong between those two countries. I think to look at Poland, it has its highest with France. Now, generally speaking, Poland has a slightly lower correlation. We'll show you that in a second, but across with all the countries. But what's really apparent, even though the correlation is quite strong, is that these blue dots are all forming under this black line, which means that across all bases, Poland is just performing better. Content is just getting a higher proportion of viewers in Poland than it is in France. Of course, at a total level, that might be a different story, given that there are more subscribers in France than Poland. But as a proportion, it seems to be getting through that Polish subscriber base at a faster rate or a higher rate than in France. And again, some of the key outliers being the local content and The Witcher, for example, performing significantly well, again, as we've already mentioned in Poland. The lowest correlation of Poland is with the UK. And you can see the local content, the locally produced content for Poland being, almost non-existent viewing in the UK, not performing particularly well. And then across the board, content performing better, generally speaking, for these originals. The only outliers on the other side of the fence are Afterlife, and which is obviously a UK original, particularly popular in the UK rather than other countries, and Tiger King, which appears to be a little bit of a UK phenomenon. The success of that, it doesn't seem to have kind of happened in the other areas of Europe as experienced in the UK. The last one we want to show is that relationship between Poland and Spain, because across all the other countries we've shown you with Poland, where Poland is such a heavier viewing country, you can see that, all of these blue dots are kind of sitting below the line. And it's still, partly the case with Spain, but Spain is also a country that has very strong performance with some of the Spanish original content. So you can see that that's happening over here, and it's also bringing this kind of the correlation levels down between these two countries. And again, you can see some of the shows we've already mentioned here for Poland. So you can see again that some of the performance is generally speaking better, which is interesting because we know that the total viewing levels are quite similar. So maybe it's a case of originals landing better in Poland than Spain, perhaps being more reliant on acquired content. But you can see here that what's driving some of that viewing in Spain in particular is a real push towards that locally produced content as well. And to provide a little summary of that, we've also got the trends, the correlations of each of those kind of put into this table. We showed this table in the Nordics webinar as well. And this gives you an idea of the performance levels and how highly correlated those are with each country. And just some standouts. We picked out this one last time around, which is showing you the relationship between the Nordics and the UK, really strong. So again, we're talking about proficiency of English, we're talking about US content, UK content performing best. And again, you can see that here. And that's the exactly same reflected in the Nordics relationship with the Netherlands. And then again, Netherlands and UK is stronger than some of the other countries. It's not quite, it's around the same level as Germany, just higher than Poland, but France, Spain, and Italy lower than with the Netherlands. In terms of Poland, generally speaking, the correlation levels are slightly lower. And this could be driven again by the Polish original content, but also, the fact that the viewing levels are so much higher. And the fact that they're not picking up viewing to some of the other local content as well. So that's generally speaking, we see lower levels of correlation with the other European countries. It's a little bit more unique in Poland than it is in the Netherlands. So that leads us on to that final question really around about local content. And this is where we're going to finish up the analysis today by looking at what's been changing and what Netflix in particular have been doing to kind of drive performance of local content, investment in local content. So we'll start with the Netherlands as the first of those. And the green line that we've got here is showing us the number of titles that we are Netflix originals. So we're looking at Netflix originals here on the platform over time, and then we're also looking at the streams to those shows. So you can see in here the number of Netflix titles that are viewed has increased over time from around about 5 or 6 at this point to around 20. So it's not big numbers, not huge numbers, still really moderate in comparison to some of the other countries that content is being produced from. But it is growing, it is increasing. And then streams, you can see behind here on a separate axis, we've got streams, and you can see a couple of key spikes. The majority of these spikes are actually being driven by the one really popular Dutch show that's been produced and have landed very well in Netherlands, but again, it's driving the spikes in viewing. And you can see that's predominantly done by Undercover. So we can see that there is an increase and there is more stuff coming on there, but it has really been 1 or 2 that have been success stories and are driving the viewing levels. And then we move on to looking at Poland. It's a slightly different story. You can see here they started here at a similar kind of level, but it has accelerated faster, and we are seeing more content in general. So that's showing us that investment being made in Poland. The opportunity perhaps there is big, and the investments being put in local content to try and drive those subscription levels. We're seeing this increase alongside subscriber numbers in terms of viewing levels. We're seeing it all kind of increase at the same time. And you can see there's 3 or 4 really key titles that have had a big impact on driving streaming to Polish content. You've got the 365 movies in here. They're not, the first one wasn't an original, but the second and third one are originals. So they're part of this. But in terms of, there's also some really big series. So you've got The Woods, we've got Sexify here. We have a third one here that give us the big spikes in viewing that we're seeing. So viewing being, driven by, a smaller number of titles, but they've almost got more success stories already. So that's helping obviously increase that, increase the brand and help their relationship with the Polish subscribers as they're investing in this local content that's landing. And we're going to finish off by just putting this in a little bit of context. So where is for the Netherlands, where is the content that is produced locally, and how does it sit in terms of a proportion of total consumption? So, this is a pie graph that's going to show a pie chart that's showing us the performance of content that comes from certain places and whether that content is original or exclusive, or whether it's something that's been an acquisition for Netflix. So we can see for Netflix in Netherlands over a 12-month period, a really high percentage. So, over 50% of the viewing is to US content. So that's US acquisitions and US originals and exclusives here. So a high proportion coming from only third of viewing, just under a third of viewing going to acquisitions from the US. So it's really, really an important source of content for Netflix globally, of course, but then, in particular, you can see it with the Netherlands and some of those other territories like the Nordics and UK, like we've talked about already. This kind of area here is where we're talking about local content. So about 5% of viewing to local content. And here we're looking at Europe and the Europe and the UK, sorry, making up a decent chunk of that viewing as well. So it's predominantly US, a little bit of reliance on UK and Europe. We've also got a little bit of APAC here coming in and contributing viewing as well. It's a very similar story when we look at Poland. So for Poland, we can see again, slightly less of a reliance on US content, slightly less on that acquired chunk as well. So down from 29% to 25%. But the actual viewing to Polish content, the local content, is the same percentage. So it's just a 5%. So whilst we're seeing these trends increase, and whilst these individual titles are delivering value, the content that's driving the highest proportion of the viewing is still coming from, those places that we are used to seeing the content on these platforms, and what has driven a large proportion of the growth of these platforms over the last few years, which has been the content from the US. But we are, seeing, UK, Europe making more of an impact, and of course, really importantly, that local investment. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to hand you back to Sophia now.
Okay, so we've had loads of really great questions come through. So I'm just going to, I know that Ali has been going through and answering a lot of them on the fly. And again, if we don't reach your question, we will get back to you. So first of all, we've had quite a few questions about the definitions of streams and reach. We also had in that vein, we had a question about reach percent, and obviously talking about how if total subscription base is larger, but the reach percent is smaller, then that could still be a larger number in total. Matt, could you maybe give us just a brief definition of streams and reach and talk a bit about reach percent as a metric?
Yes, absolutely. So streams and reach, yes. Where we define reach in particular, let's start there, is a unique account. So we our subscriber base as a whole we look at is Netflix or Amazon, but we usually predominantly for this analysis we've been splitting those the analysis we've done into those platforms. So any instance in which we've referred to reach percentage here, we're talking about the percentage of the subscriber base. And in most cases, we've been looking at individual countries. So it's a really good metric for looking at that comparison, because if we were to be giving total reach numbers, we might see the highest numbers in the UK, lower numbers for those regions that have got a lower number of subscribers in general. So that reach percentage is a way of kind of leveling that playing field for us. It's the percentage of subscribers that have watched something, and that's at account level. In terms of streams, our definition of stream is a stream start ultimately. So it's somebody has started watching that piece of content. So that's a kind of cumulative number of views. So we tend to see the shows that are like Friends and Big Bang Theory and Modern Family and those acquired bits of content with vast number of episodes getting to the top of the streams because they're just generating such high levels of viewing. And Reach is really good at looking at it a different way, where we're not just looking at binge viewing, taking up these viewing levels very high. Reach allows us to look at the content that is having the widest appeal and getting people in to watch one or two or more episodes of that series.
Matt, can I just quickly jump in there? So we can change those definitions on our system. So we can do reach, there was 2 minutes or there was 3 minutes. And similar with the definition of streams, what we can do with our systems, we can choose how we want to report these. For this instant, the stream was they started it, and the reach definition was it 2 minutes? You're mute, man.
The reach was the same, but we can, again, as you mentioned, we at a stream by stream level, we get to understand not only what they've watched, but also how long they've watched for. So that gives us the ability to be able to see, to be able to add in, these sorts of thresholds to the viewing. So we've done this as a default for this particular analysis, but through our platform, through when you access the data, you have the ability to be able to set thresholds on the data. So you can say, okay, we want to only count streams if they're 2 minutes or more, or the same for reach, for example, as well.
Okay, great. We also had a bit of interest in the possibility of account sharing across Poland and Spain. So is there a way that we can estimate that or look at account sharing? What do we know so far about account sharing? Yeah,
it's a difficult question. It's one of those ones that, potentially would be difficult to capture entirely truly with a survey, perhaps as well. It could have some difficulty there. So from the data, we are actually looking at exploring ways in which we can do that. One of the latest developments for us is that we have much improved coverage of device and what device people are using at. So we're looking at things like understanding accounts that are being used by multiple devices and perhaps multiple TV sets, for example, to help us give us a steer on, account sharing. We're looking at when viewing is taking place simultaneously. We're looking at viewing that takes place over a large number of different devices as well. So these are the sorts of things that we're starting to take a look at, and we're going to be kind of providing a bit more color on, because we think we can use the data itself and dig a bit deeper into the data to try and get a picture of who we think is perhaps doing a bit of account sharing, and then look at the numbers of that, and then look at the challenge that presents Netflix, for instance, as they're trying to battle that, because that's a huge challenge for them in terms of generating more revenue in their existing markets is trying to kind of get past the account sharers and the impact that has. I know there's been a trial in Latin America recently, and the success of that I think isn't. I'm not too sure of the success of that study at that point, but be interesting to see the impact that one has. But it's a big challenge for them, and we're looking to try and understand that. I know Sophia is going to be giving a bit of information around a conference we'll be speaking at later this year, and in that conference we're actually going to be tackling that question head on with the data that we've got.
Great. And then another question which I thought was interesting was about how the competitive landscape affects viewing in different countries. So, for example, it was pointed out that one of the participants has said that in Spain and Poland, there's more of a duopoly in the TV business. And I'm just wondering on your thoughts, like what have we seen in other countries, for example, where there's lots of competition?
Yeah, I think you can see that in some of the findings that we got from that analysis. I completely agree. I don't know who it was that submitted those points of view. But
Simon Thomas, I think.
No, I completely agree. I think that there's a huge factor of that, and as we mentioned, and Ali's pointed this out to me as well, is that we think there's a huge part of it is what else is out there, what else is available, what competition is there, and that is obviously going to be reflected in the amount of time people are able to spend and how they divide that time. I think it's pretty we're pretty clear on the fact that there's only a kind of finite amount of time that people will have available to spend viewing content, and then it's about how that is distributed, and Netflix seems to be getting a very big chunk of it in those two particular countries.
Matt, do you think that if you do an index of how much SVOD viewing as a percentage of total viewing is in a country, it will give us an indication of how good the domestic TV is? So in countries where SVOD is really growing rapidly, not just an interesting question, because I noticed it's happening in Spain and Italy and Australia, and it's happening in Poland, but not as much in UK and Netherlands. Is there a sign, like obviously what Simon said, is it's really competitive and it's harder to take share of everyone, whereas in markets that aren't so competitive, there isn't a variety, and a platform such as Netflix or Amazon offers variety, brings people in. Do you think it works like that?
I think it'd be an interesting analysis to run. I think I think it makes sense to me that if the other options aside from SVOD are weaker, then that proportion is going to be higher to SVOD. I think that does make sense to me. We haven't run that particular analysis in too much detail, but I think I think that's something that would provide some interesting findings and potentially be a reflection on the quality of the competition out there. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to have to cut this short because we're going to run out of time, and I know Ali wants to make some concluding remarks. So before everyone runs off and has their lovely Friday afternoon, whether it's, I don't know, work or maybe relaxing, I just wanted to just let everyone know a bit about a conference that Matt has got coming up that he's already mentioned. So the ASI conference, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a really great conference, and I advise you to book tickets if you're interested in the industry. So Matt's going to be delving, as he said, a bit more into this idea of account sharing, about devices, and just a bit more about subscriber behavior. We're also going to be at MIPCOM. So if you would like to get in touch and have a meeting with us, then just take note of these emails on the screen. That's charlotte.harris@digital-i.com and then will.oakley@digital-i.com. We'd love to see you there, so please do let us know. And just generally, if you would like to book a meeting and follow up on any of these things, we're happy to chat through some of these suggestions, really insightful and interesting comments that have been provided from the floor. So Ali,
thank you,
passing over to you.
Thank you everyone for attending this session, and I hope we've managed to demonstrate to you that we have found the solution for measuring subscription video on demand, which happens everywhere on every device. TV metering solution provides an excellent solution for measuring viewing on your TV set at home, and it's undoubtable. We've learned loads from it, and it's provided superb insight for the industry. However, with the work we've done and what we presented to you, I hope you've seen that what we have provided the next generation of solutions to measuring viewing on all devices everywhere on subscription video on demand. And what those slides Matt showed you shows how homogeneous the viewing is, even across countries. Yeah. So people in Nordics have so much similarity with viewing than people in Spain. Although the correlation was 0.5, still 50% of the variance can be explained by other. And all of you who are into the boring part of sampling, you know how important being the homogeneity is to the accuracy of sampling. And this is what we discovered with our relatively modest panel sizes of 1,250 accounts. Remember, that could be as much as 4,000 for a profile. We've managed to show that we can reach the streamers' figures. Thank you very much, all of you, for attending. And I hope you're going to join us on this revolution, where by supporting us, we can put much more money into measuring new services, going into new countries, and continue to improve our service to give you everything you need for your decision making. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ali. And yep, so again, we will be sending around a recording of this to everyone who has registered and set up. A special shout out to our clients, if any of you are on the call. We're not a VC-backed company. We haven't had any external investments. This has been a 100% client-led and client-supported venture. So it sounds cheesy and cliche, but we really couldn't have done it without you. So we will be sending clients, if you want a full breakdown of the PowerPoint slides, plus extra details that we have, then let us know, we'll send that through. If you're not yet a client, again, we will be sending through that recording and we'd love to book a meeting. And if you're interested in the PowerPoint slides, well, maybe you should think about maybe becoming a client one day. Anyway, we'd love to speak to you, give you a demo of things that you're most interested in, delve into the countries you want to see, the shows that matter most to you. And most of all, thank you so much for attending. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.